September 1901, Teddy Roosevelt was inaugurated as the nation's 26th and youngest president. Now, it's the youngest part that caused some consternation among the old establishment of the regal noble families of the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the Carnegies and Mellons and Roosevelts. They were afraid of the impetuous mistakes of a young president, and they had wanted to give him at least one term as vice president to learn how things should be done, which means their way. So they looked around and thought, well, let's just slow everything down in Washington. This first term, we'll just slow everything down so he doesn't make any impetuous mistakes. And they proceeded to gum up Congress. Well, Roosevelt was no fool. He had been the 33rd governor of New York. He'd been the lead police commissioner of New York City. He'd been his assistant secretary of the Navy. He had led some pretty serious hombres in some serious combat at Las Guasimas and San Juan Hill in the Cuban conflagration. He was a dangerous man, and he was not one to be trifled with. He looked around and he understood what was going on, and he said, okay, I need a victory. I need a win somewhere so that I can blow back in town and undo this logjam. Now, turns out the governors of Louisiana and Mississippi had been involved in a long-running argument about the channeling of a watershed that they held in common. And where that channel went would determine where the money went. And neither one of those governors were willing to make any accommodation that did not give them the most money. They wouldn't budge. Roosevelt thought, well, I'll just drop into Mississippi and I'll negotiate a fast deal and break this all up and roll into Washington with a win under my belt. And he rolled into Mississippi, and he found out pretty quick that in the state of Mississippi, not all the swamp is in the swamp, that a fair amount of the swamp is in the Mississippi legislature. Didn't take him too awful long to just get frustrated and say, fine, I got to get out of town for a day or two. Let's go hunting. What's the most dangerous animal in this part of the country? Turned out to be the Mississippi black bear. Gonna need a guide. Boy, did they get him a guide. They got him Holt Collier, a very famous tracker and outdoorsman. He's the only tracker that could track through standing water. People didn't believe it, and he proved it again and again and again. He had quite a reputation. As a young man, he had been a bold, dangerous, daring, and deadly Confederate cavalryman. And after the war, he went on to become a lawman, and he became a tracker, a woodsman. He tracked many an outlaw through the swamp, but he would never track a runaway. So there were Collier and Roosevelt standing around looking at their hunting camp. First, there was a presidential security unit, about time. Around the entire camp was a picket line of Army soldiers to protect the camp. There was a mobile Army field kitchen. There was a mobile Army medical unit, mostly big packs on the back of a mule. There were wagons that brought all the tents and the trunks and the supplies and the cots and the chairs and the desks. And then there was an empty wagon for the body of the bear. And then way back behind them all, for no apparent reason other than to make the point that they can always find the kitchen, were 3 musicians. Roosevelt looked at the camp and said, like trying to hunt with a circus. So, between 2 and 3 in the morning, just Roosevelt and Holt Collier snuck out of that quiet sleeping camp and into the darkened swamp. Fade out, fade in. 10 or 12 hours later, of wading through ankle-deep mud and knee-high water, things were not bully. They were not bully at all. And finally, Collier got sick of putting up with it, and he said, fine, There's a dry rise of land right there with a tree stump on it. You stay there. I'll go in the swamp, I'll get you a bear, and I'll bring you back. Don't leave, because if you leave, you're going to get lost, and that means I'm going to have to go in the swamp, get a bear, bring it back here, and then I'm going to have to go find you because you're lost. Sit still, stay put. And then with a couple of bedraggled dogs, he made his way into the swamp. Now, history does not record how he was able to cut, trail, track, and lasso a fully grown 2 to 3 year old female Mississippi black bear, but he did. History does not record how he was able to get that swamp back across the valley, but he did. It had to be some version of, come on, and bad bear, bad bear. Finally, late in the afternoon, as those long golden shafts of light cut through the ubiquitous Spanish moss, starting with a distant splash and growing ever louder, finally into view came a sad parade. Here came Holt Collier, covered in mud and pine needles and stickers and brush and wet, and over his shoulder was a rope going back to a bedraggled black bear with mud all over it and thistles. And around it was like a halo of mosquitoes. It was this halo of two wide-eyed, foaming, bone-rail, skinny, psychotic dogs on account of there's a bear. Collier threw down the rope and told Roosevelt, there's your bear. Shoot the bear. Roosevelt looked at it and he got his favorite Winchester 97 and took a nice long aim, get that elbow up, take a breath. Then he started to hold his breath and start to squeeze. I cannot shoot that bear. Well, I sound just like him, don't I? Yeah, it's a gift. I cannot shoot that bear. It's not fair to the bear. Well, history does not record the next 3 or 4 things that Holt Collier had to say about that little tidbit of news. After he has to go through a swamp, lasso a bear, and bring it back, and now the big shot city guy don't want the bear anymore. Well, that really wasn't the big problem. The big problem was how those two outdoorsmen were going to get the rope from around the neck of a now 6-foot-tall swamp queen who just got her second wind. But somehow they did. Now, nothing stays secret. And the word got around. Now, there are several nationally important newspapers in this country. The Cherokee Phoenix is one, now in its 192nd year of publication. An open window on Indian country, and if you don't know, there's a lot going on in Indian country. Another is the Washington Post. Now, the Post had a political cartoonist named Clifford Berryman. And Berryman heard the buzz, can't shoot the bear, it's not fair to the bear. And he thought, I'll do a panel on it. It's a triangular composition. And in one corner, of course, you got Teddy Roosevelt dressed like a Rough Rider. And he's doing like Nell of the melodrama, I can't pay the rent. And he's saying, I cannot shoot that bear. It's not fair to the bear. And then up on the top of the triangle, you got Holt Collier, and he's holding his end of the rope. And then down at the other end of the triangle was the bear. And then underneath it was a couple of captions. And the small caption said, drawing a line in the sand. But it's the bigger caption that stuck with him. The bigger caption that stuck with Teddy Roosevelt and his legacy throughout his life and throughout history. Character counts. Which makes it kind of curious that Clifford Berryman had drawn Holt Collier, standing up there holding his end of the rope. He drew Holt Collier as a white man, which he was not. But you couldn't have a black man tell the most powerful white man in America, "Sit still, stay put." And then the bear, instead of it being drawn as a fully grown, dangerous swamp animal, Berryman drew the most adorable little fuzzball bear cub you ever saw in your life. "Hi, everybody!" America was charmed. They loved it. So much so that for the rest of his administration, anytime Berryman did a panel about Roosevelt, somewhere in that panel, peeking out like Waldo to come, was a little tiny fuzzball bear. "Hi, everybody!" And America was charmed. Now, we cut away in our story to a strange and exotic land called Bedford-Stuyvesant. Turns out Morris and Rose Michelon were immigrants to America. They'd been born in Russia and had to run for their lives to get away from the Cossack pogroms. And they met on the boat, and they fell in love, and like so many other Americans, they brought more than they ever take. They had both a neighborhood-sized candy shop and an America-sized idea. And they took everything they could get their hands on, they mortgaged it all, and they seized their moment. And they introduced to the world the teddy bear. And it swept the land like wildfire. When he ran for re-election in 1904, the teddy bear was the most popular toy in America. So here you have an incumbent politician running for re-election, and the number one toy in America reminds everybody about his personal character. Roosevelt couldn't give him away fast enough. At every whistle stop, they were throwing him out the train windows, off the back of the speaker's platform, skipping him over the crowd like flat stones on still water. Teddy, Teddy, Teddy. When he left office in January of 1909, the teddy bear was the single highest selling toy on planet Earth. It had been embraced and carried away to the four corners and adapted to every culture. Even today, there are constant memes about teddy bears and celebrities with their teddy bears and famous animals with their teddy bears. And one of my favorite stories about them was about a laboratory researcher who had compassion for a kangaroo rat in the lab. And so she manufactured an absolutely perfect, tiny, powder blue and white teddy bear. Had a little pink tongue and little dark eyes and a little dark nose and little ears. And as soon as that kangaroo rat in the lab saw it, it grabbed it and pulled it close, and it always had it near its face. It was inseparable. It would never go anywhere or be without that bear for a second. Of course, you know, a kangaroo rat's still a rat. We don't know what the rat was saying. Could have been saying, "I kill you, I kill you. As soon as the lights turn out, I kill you. If they ever turn the lights out, I kill you." Of course, I don't know. I don't speak rat, but you got to remember, a kangaroo rat is nothing but a rat with an adios feature. Adios, boing. Oh. Those two governors. Neither one of them would make a budge because the other one might make more money. Yeah. That young president reached in and scooped out the whole watershed, gave it back to the American people. Delta Waters National Forest. And as a national forest, it is now and will forever be illegal to hunt black bear. Ha!